I've been, yeah, having a really great time with a bunch of different projects. So I'm just going to be presenting on a few that I think are really key. Some interesting areas that I've been looking at since moving here is I think a lot of people see New York and Nairobi as totally different places. We have one that's the city of dreams, and some of the wealthiest people in the world live there, and there's a really high employment rate, and there's a lot of brilliant artists and opportunities. And then the other is Nairobi, which is one of the largest capitals on the continent. It's a big city. It's currently the startup hub of East Africa, and really the startup hub of the continent, but Lagos sometimes is a bit of a competitor. And there's always amazing things happening, and there's definitely this view that an African city has different problems than a first world city in the US. And so this presentation is, instead of focusing on New York and upstate New York, which was last year's presentation, is looking from a Nairobi lens, but a similar idea of waste, food, and art in our urban environments, and really showing that there's not as many differences as we think in the Nairobi context compared to the New York context. And there's actually a lot of knowledge sharing and growth from both of those, and that the perceived hierarchy doesn't necessarily exist. And the more we set that aside and really focus on the similarities, there's so much collaboration and knowledge potential. So this is part of my work as a programs manager for Cornell University, the same role I had last year. But I've been focusing since this on art and science projects, specifically nutrient recovery from human waste streams, and trying to understand how to best build a solid foundation for collaboration and knowledge sharing about waste recycling, human waste specifically, whether that's market wastes or excreta or livestock wastes, to agricultural fertilizers in a market. And how do we think about that as a circular economy, as George said. So I'm not exactly sure on the year, but the Oxford Medical Journal essentially has cited in a large review of its editors that two of the world's greatest innovations have been sanitation and fertilizer production. And there's a lot of reason for that. There's been a lot of lives saved in the Green Revolution in India. That's shown there's been huge reduction in diarrheal deaths since the 1600s and even before that, but really spreading in the 1700s, 1800s, and even 1900s now, with proper sanitation. We're still seeing it in many communities here in East Africa, but it's just because we have them and it's an invention does not mean that it's perfect. So on our left here, we have raw sewage in Newton Creek. I showed this picture last year. There's many new pictures of flooded subways and roads and creeks in Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan from the past year, but none of them really show the raw sewage right there and present in the same way. But I'm sure many of you have waded through water in the past 6 months and wondered, I wonder what's in here. I wonder what is getting soaked into my jeans right now. And then to the right, we have a farmer spraying urea fertilizer without any PPE onto a rice paddy that when it rains, if the urea hasn't had enough time to absorb into the soil and into the plants, or there's not enough phosphorus, and so there's a limited uptake of nitrogen to occur, there's another deficiency, that urea will dissolve and go into waterways, and will turn the water to the left. It will have a similar effect of nutrient loading, and there won't be necessarily pathogen issues, but there will be algal blooms, there will be death of aquatic communities, and then there's health risks linked to the use of urea fertilizers, and there's a lot of climate risk to the use of urea fertilizers. And so how do we go from from a linear market, these two linear problems, to a circular economy or a circular ecology. So instead of making it a plus, let's make it an arrow, and see how that can actually become in a system. And so I talked about this last year in some more technical options, and today I'm going to talk about a project I've been doing with an artist collective here in Nairobi, in an informal settlement, taking nutrients, specifically nitrogen, from urine and making it into a usable soil product. And so, you know, we have public urination all over the place, the same way we worry about sewage in our streets. I think having too much urine, too much feces in our walkways, or in small rivers on the side of the road is a problem. And public urination is common here, as as it's also common on the streets where taxi drivers wait in Manhattan. You smell the ammonium coming from plastic bottles that they've peed on during their trips, or peed in during their trips and then tossed out the window. I think it's a problem of all cities and urban places. And so I've been working with this art collective because I find that art, food, waste, it's all one system, and this art collective has really done a great job at doing that. They work in the community, they work with problems like this, and then they make really fun, creative solutions with cheap materials that they have at hand. So here on the top left is the urinal for collection that's made out of a water jug that we melted and painted. Then the beer cans are connected together to make pipe in a tubing, covering a PVC pipe, so it's not stolen. Anything too great is anything with any price of more than 50 cents has the risk of being taken. And then there's just a box that we bought secondhand from an office sale in the industrial area that was spray painted with stencils that they made to try to say Kujua Hapa, which means pee here, instead of Habana Kujua Hapa, which means don't pee here. And so you see, we had about 6 different urinals. This is another design. This was for a club. A colleague made a really great joke of it, of, you know, there's always a joke of aiming at the target. Let's actually do it. Let's make it a game, and let's collect as much as possible. So Kojua Manafua, which means we like give your pee, is one of the semi-translations. And then it's a pyrolysis. So I talked about last year biochar. This is the system that we're doing. We're really using feedstocks like corn cobs that you can see in the bottom here, and this bucket has urine in it. We take hot coals out, that heat treats the urine, and there's absorption of the ammonia from the urine onto biochar, and then we're able to use it in the urban shamba that they have here. And that's growing chard and kale in local varieties, and then another crop that's called cowpea or kunde in Kiswahili, and that's used to feed the community. And so how do we take this problem and make a circular system? And then in this problem, we can't just look at it from a scientific perspective. We need to look at it with the fun of a target in a club, and a pea target in a club, and, you know, this joy of getting food, and this joy of getting food with your community, and separating it to just science is not sufficient for the big task that we're up against, with a growing population and infrastructure that is not up to date and is not going to be up to date. There's too high of a cost. That's the case with New York City's wastewater treatment plant, and it's definitely the case with wastewater treatment plants here in Nairobi. And so one aspect of this has been working with the Circular Bionutrient Economy Network in Kenya and in East Africa wholly. So we have organizations apart from Wajuku from Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Burundi, and South Africa that are working on this issue. We have, you know, a lack of infrastructure that exists in the region, means that there isn't the same factoring in of a sunk cost that a lot of our policymakers back in the States, in the West, and specifically in New York City, constantly bring up in meetings, and they say, we've already invested $14 billion in the past 10 years in this infrastructure system. We're not going to invest another 10 million in a different one. We don't have the funds, and we've already had, you know, also the fixed cost of training and getting a system underway, so on and so forth. But there's potential to come up with really good system solutions in areas that don't have that infrastructure, but do have that need. And so in that combination of sanitation and fertilizer production, we're able to kind of do two birds with one stone. But to do so, it takes community. It takes people being excited. It takes fun. It takes art. It takes being on the ground in areas that aren't super nice, not just being at interesting conferences or great Zoom meetings. It takes really thinking, talking to the people who are doing the work, going to Newton Creek and seeing what it looks like, taking time to really get out and work with the people that you wouldn't necessarily expect would be on the same page, but or don't have the immediate collaboration ideas or incentives, but really are part of the team. And I think that's something that's so wonderful about USI, and something that is really wonderful about this circular bionutrient economy network that we inaugurated last January here in Western Kenya, that has spread to the region. And I'm really hoping, as steps moving forward, we have this conference that is local, and there's no virtual part of it. It's all in person. I had a great email thread with Paul about that a couple days ago, about the importance of in-person meeting. But I hope that with time, we're really able to connect these two cities of Nairobi and New York as an example, but other cities in the region, to try to bring the communities together, to problem solve, to bring the food, the people, the art, the waste together, because it's not just a scientific issue to solve. It's not just an artistic marketing issue to solve. It's not just a policy issue to solve. It's really a big joint effort. So that's all I had. I wanted to leave time for questions, and yeah, chat with some folks.